They said the moon never made mistakes, yet on the night the Alpha King was meant to choose his queen, Destiny stood unnoticed in the shadows wearing a servant's plain gray dress. The kingdom of Silver Hollow had waited 100 years for this ceremony, and every road leading to the royal capital overflowed with decorated wagons, riders draped in family colors, and hopeful daughters whose futures rested beneath the silver glow of the full moon. Towering banners bearing the royal wolf crest fluttered above marble towers, while crystal lanterns painted the palace courtyard with soft blue light. Noble families whispered promises of glory, merchants sold moon lilies said to bring fortune, and musicians filled the cool evening air with melodies that echoed across the ancient stone walls. Everyone believed history would remember this night, but not for the reason they imagined. Evelyn Carter kept her eyes lowered as she carried the embroidered bridal cloak assigned to Lady Isabella Montgomery, the kingdom's most celebrated beauty and the woman every noble expected to become the next Luna. Evelyn had learned long ago that invisible people survived longer than noticed ones. She moved carefully through crowded corridors, quietly adjusting ribbons, polishing silver clasps, and making certain every detail around Isabella appeared flawless, while no one noticed the servant whose steady hands made perfection possible. At 22, Evelyn possessed a quiet kindness that never demanded attention. Her pale skin carried the warmth of countless mornings spent beneath open skies. Her long chestnut hair remained tied into a simple braid beneath a linen scarf, and her clear blue eyes reflected gentleness instead of ambition. The palace staff appreciated her honesty, but among nobles, kindness was considered ordinary, almost forgettable. As the royal bells rang across the capital exactly 8 times, conversations suddenly faded. Every guest turned toward the towering bronze doors leading into the Hall of Moonlight. A hush settled across hundreds of waiting hearts. Tonight, Alpha King Cale Ashford would choose his bride before the entire kingdom. No challenge. No contest. One decision. One queen. Evelyn carefully stepped behind a marble pillar to avoid blocking the view of distinguished guests. From there she watched Isabella smile with effortless confidence while noble women exchanged jealous glances and powerful alphas nodded in approval. Everything unfolded exactly as everyone expected. Yet without understanding why, Evelyn felt an unfamiliar ache spread quietly through her chest the instant the palace doors began to open. It wasn't fear. It wasn't hope. It felt like remembering someone she had never met. Then Alpha King Cale Ashford crossed the threshold, and before his eyes found the waiting brides, they paused for the briefest heartbeat on the servant hidden in the shadows. Cale Ashford walked into the Hall of Moonlight with the calm confidence of a ruler who had spent his entire life carrying the weight of a kingdom. Every noble bowed as he passed, their eyes filled with admiration, fear, or carefully hidden ambition. The silver embroidery on his midnight blue ceremonial coat shimmered beneath thousands of crystal lights, while the ancient wolf emblem fastened across his chest reflected the glow of the full moon pouring through the towering stained glass windows. He acknowledged no one with more than a slight nod. Tradition demanded that the Alpha King remain unreadable until the moon goddess revealed her blessing, and Cale had mastered that discipline years ago. Elder Rowan stepped forward beside the sacred stone altar and raised a carved staff toward the ceiling. The music faded. Every conversation disappeared into silence. The only sound left was the distant whisper of the wind slipping through the high towers surrounding the palace. Tonight, the elder declared, his steady voice reaching every corner of the hall, the moon goddess watches over us once again. May truth guide every heart, and may destiny reveal itself without fear or deception. Hundreds of candles surrounding the altar suddenly brightened as though answering the ancient prayer. Noble families smiled with quiet confidence. Most already believed they knew the outcome. Lady Isabella Montgomery stood gracefully at the front of the gathering, dressed in a breathtaking white gown embroidered with silver thread that sparkled like freshly fallen snow. Her golden hair flowed over her shoulders in elegant curls, and the jeweled crown resting upon her head caught every beam of moonlight. She looked every bit the queen the kingdom expected. Her parents exchanged proud smiles while neighboring nobles whispered that no woman in Silver Hollow possessed greater beauty or refinement. Evelyn remained where servants belonged, several steps behind the honored guests, holding a tray of crystal goblets that no one had touched. She could hear every compliment offered to Isabella, every confident prediction, every passing remark that the ceremony had become little more than a formality. She lowered her gaze and reminded herself that none of it concerned her. She was there to serve, nothing more. Yet the strange feeling inside her chest refused to disappear. Instead, it grew stronger each time she glanced toward the altar. It was almost as though an invisible thread stretched between her and the ancient stone beneath the moonlight. She quietly dismissed the thought as exhaustion. The past week had been filled with endless preparations, sleepless nights, and constant work. Her imagination was simply wandering. Across the hall, Kale accepted greetings from the council before taking his place beside the sacred platform. Outwardly, he remained perfectly composed, but something unsettled him. The moment he had entered the palace, an unfamiliar warmth had brushed against his senses before disappearing into the crowd. It had lasted only a heartbeat, yet it lingered in his thoughts. His wolf had become unusually alert, silently searching for something it could not identify. He discreetly scanned the gathering once more. Elegant gowns, polished uniforms, noble crests, confident smiles. Everything appeared exactly as it should. Still, that quiet feeling remained, just beyond his reach, like hearing the faint echo of a forgotten song. Isabella stepped forward when summoned, offering a graceful curtsy before meeting Kale with calm confidence. The guests watched with anticipation, certain they were witnessing the beginning of a new era. Hidden behind the marble pillar, Evelyn accidentally lifted her eyes at that exact moment, and without understanding why, Kale looked away from the noblewoman standing before him and found himself searching the crowd once again. The silence inside the Hall of Moonlight deepened until it seemed every heartbeat echoed beneath the towering crystal ceiling. Elder Rowan slowly lifted the ancient crown of silver pines from its velvet cushion and placed it upon the sacred altar where generations of Alpha Kings had begun their reign beside the women chosen to stand with them. Moonlight poured through the stained glass above, bathing the crown in a pale silver glow that made it appear almost alive. Every eye remained fixed on Kale Ashford. This was the moment the kingdom had anticipated for decades. According to tradition, the Alpha King would step forward, extend his hand to the woman he believed worthy, and the blessing of the moon goddess would complete the ceremony. No one questioned how it would unfold. Isabella Montgomery took a slow breath and lifted her chin with practiced elegance. Her smile remained calm, although excitement sparkled behind her eyes. She had spent years preparing for this night, learning every royal custom, every court tradition, every graceful movement expected of a future Luna. Around her, noble families exchanged satisfied glances, already imagining the celebrations that would follow. Servants quietly stepped back to clear the ceremonial path, and Evelyn moved with them, carrying the untouched crystal goblets toward the edge of the hall. She kept her attention on her work, refusing to look toward the altar again. Whatever strange feeling had settled inside her heart did not belong here. She reminded herself that dreams were dangerous for people born without privilege. The safest place for someone like her had always been unnoticed. Kale climbed the marble steps leading to the altar. His expression revealed nothing, yet the strange sensation inside him had grown stronger with every passing minute. His wolf remained restless beneath his calm exterior, almost impatient, as though searching through countless unfamiliar scents for one that refused to disappear. He had never experienced anything like it. Years of discipline prevented him from showing even the smallest hesitation, but inwardly he questioned why his instincts resisted the certainty expected of this ceremony. Elder Rowan lowered his head respectfully. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "the moon awaits your decision." Kale inhaled slowly before turning toward the assembled women. One by one, his eyes passed over every noble daughter standing proudly beneath the silver banners. Each woman represented powerful alliances, respected bloodlines, and carefully planned futures. Then his gaze settled on Isabella. She met his eyes without fear. Confident, composed, ready. It was exactly what everyone expected. After a brief pause that felt much longer than a few seconds, Kale stepped forward and extended his hand. Isabella accepted it gracefully. Cheers erupted throughout the hall. Noble families applauded while musicians struck triumphant chords that echoed from every stone pillar. Smiles spread across nearly every face as flower petals drifted gently from the upper balconies. The kingdom believed its future had just been secured. Hidden among the servants, Evelyn offered a quiet smile that never reached her eyes. She lowered her head, placed the final crystal goblet onto a silver tray, and silently turned toward the palace entrance. There was no bitterness in her expression, only a calm acceptance she had practiced for most of her life. Yet as she took her first step away from the celebration, a faint chill swept through the grand hall. Several candles flickered at once. The silver flames surrounding the ancient altar trembled for a single heartbeat before becoming still again. No one seemed to notice except Elder Rowan, whose peaceful expression slowly gave way to quiet uncertainty as he stared at the sacred crown glowing beneath the moonlight. As joyful music filled the palace, Evelyn continued toward the towering entrance without once looking back. She held the empty silver tray close against her chest, hoping to disappear before anyone noticed the quiet servant leaving the celebration. She had almost reached the carved oak doors when a cheerful laugh echoed across the polished marble floor. "Leaving already?" a young noblewoman called. The music softened just enough for nearby conversations to pause. Evelyn stopped and turned politely. Lady Beatrice Hawthorne approached with two companions, all dressed in shimmering gowns that reflected the candlelight like flowing water. Beatrice wore a pleasant smile, but her eyes carried a different message. "Surely you are not disappointed," she said sweetly. Everyone knew how tonight would end. A few nearby guests chuckled. Evelyn lowered her gaze respectfully. "I only wished to return the serving tray, my lady." "How thoughtful," Beatrice replied with exaggerated admiration. "Even tonight, you remember your place." More laughter drifted through the gathering. Isabella remained near the altar surrounded by well-wishers, too occupied to notice the exchange, while Cale accepted formal congratulations from members of the royal council. Evelyn tightened her fingers around the tray but answered with calm dignity, "I have always known my responsibilities." "Then allow us to help you remember them," another noblewoman added lightly before stepping closer to adjust Evelyn's simple gray shawl. A servant should not wander through a royal ceremony looking as though she belongs among honored guests. She gave the fabric a careless tug. The old fastening slipped free, and the shawl slid from Evelyn's shoulders before settling quietly onto the marble floor. There was nothing scandalous about what happened. Her plain linen dress remained neat and modest, yet the gesture itself carried enough humiliation that several nobles smiled behind raised glasses while whispers spread through the hall. "Someone should teach her proper ceremony etiquette," one guest murmured. "She almost looked like she believed she was part of this evening," another replied. Evelyn bent down, lifted the folded shawl with careful hands, and brushed away the tiny specks of dust gathered along its edge. She could have hurried away. She could have apologized for something she had never done. Instead, she simply folded the fabric neatly over her arm. Her cheeks warmed but her voice remained steady. "Thank you," she said softly. "I can manage." The unexpected grace in her response caused several servants watching from the walls to exchange quiet glances. They had expected tears or embarrassment. Instead, Evelyn answered kindness with kindness, even when none had been offered. Across the hall, Cale instinctively turned toward the sound of fading laughter. His eyes settled on the small gathering surrounding the servant in gray. He could not hear every word from where he stood, but he noticed something else. The strange feeling inside him suddenly became stronger than before. It was no longer a faint whisper. It pulled gently at his heart, urging him to look more closely. Elder Rowan noticed it as well, though not the conversation. His attention remained fixed on the sacred altar. The silver flame surrounding the ancient crown flickered again, brighter this time, despite the complete absence of wind. The old priest frowned. In all his years serving the moon goddess, the ceremonial fire had never responded after the Alpha King had already made his choice. Something unseen had awakened within the hall, and while the kingdom continued celebrating, Destiny had quietly refused to leave with the forgotten servant walking toward the palace doors. The great door stood only a few steps away when a young palace guard reached for the bronze handle and offered Evelyn a respectful nod. "Safe travels," he said quietly, one of the few voices that carried genuine kindness. Evelyn returned a grateful smile. "Thank you." She took one final step toward the moonlit courtyard beyond the palace, but something deep inside her urged her to stop. It was not a sound her ears could hear or a command anyone else had spoken. It felt like an ancient memory gently brushing against her soul. She slowly turned back toward the Hall of Moonlight. Hundreds of guests continued celebrating beneath crystal chandeliers. Musicians played cheerful melodies while servants refilled golden goblets. Isabella accepted endless congratulations with graceful composure, and Alpha King Cale Ashford stood surrounded by council members discussing the future of the kingdom. Everything appeared exactly as it should. Yet, Evelyn could not silence the quiet ache growing within her heart. She drew a slow breath before speaking, not loudly, but clearly enough that the nearest conversations faded into silence. "I hope the moon never regrets tonight." Her words floated through the hall with unexpected calm. There was no anger behind them. No accusation. Only quiet sorrow wrapped in gentle sincerity. A few nobles laughed as though they had heard an innocent servant trying to sound poetic. Lady Beatrice shook her head with an amused smile. "Listen to that," she whispered. "Even disappointment becomes drama." Several guests nodded in agreement before returning to their conversations. But Elder Rowan did not smile. The old priest's weathered hands tightened around his carved staff as his eyes shifted toward the sacred altar. Every silver flame surrounding the ancient crown suddenly leaned in the same direction, not toward the open doors or the evening breeze, but toward Evelyn. His heartbeat quickened. Such a sign existed only in forgotten legends preserved within the oldest temple records. Before he could speak, another strange event unfolded. The full moon shining through the towering stained glass windows briefly disappeared behind a drifting cloud. The brilliant silver light filling the hall softened into a quiet twilight, and the joyful music faltered as several musicians glanced toward the darkened sky. An uneasy silence slowly settled over the celebration. Cale felt it immediately. A sharp warmth spread through the mark hidden beneath his ceremonial collar, not painful but impossible to ignore. His wolf stirred with sudden certainty, no longer searching without direction. It had found something. His eyes instinctively turned toward the palace entrance where Evelyn stood holding nothing more than a folded gray shawl. She had not moved. She simply waited, as though listening to something only she could hear. For one suspended moment, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Then the sacred crown resting upon the altar released a faint silver glow that no candle had created. Gasps spread through the gathered nobles. Elder Rowan slowly stepped forward, his face pale with disbelief. "That cannot be," he whispered to himself. "The blessing has already been given." Yet the light continued to grow brighter. Isabella noticed it and looked toward Cale with sudden uncertainty. Members of the royal council exchanged confused glances. Even the servants standing against the wall sensed that something beyond human understanding had quietly entered the ceremony. Evelyn lowered her eyes once more, believing none of it concerned her, and gently turned toward the palace doors again. At that exact instant, the silver light surrounding the ancient crown pulsed one final time, brighter than the moon itself, and the ceremonial bell that had remained silent for more than 3 centuries rang by itself across the kingdom of Silver Hollow. The ancient bell echoed across Silver Hollow with a voice that no living soul had heard before. Its deep, clear tone rolled over the palace towers, drifted across the sleeping city, and disappeared into the surrounding forests where generations of wolves believed the moon goddess herself listened to every sacred vow. Inside the Hall of Moonlight, every conversation stopped. Noble guests looked toward one another in bewilderment, unsure whether they had truly heard the legendary bell or imagined it together. Elder Rowan slowly climbed the altar steps, his trembling hands reaching toward the glowing crown without touching it. His face had lost all color. He searched the ancient carvings circling the stone platform, as though hoping the symbols themselves would explain what had just happened. Instead, another impossible sign revealed itself. Fine silver lines hidden within the marble floor began to shimmer beneath the moonlight, spreading outward from the altar like gentle streams flowing across polished stone. They did not travel toward Isabella, nor toward the gathered nobles. They stretched quietly across the hall until they stopped several feet from the palace entrance where Evelyn had paused. She stared at the glowing patterns surrounding her worn shoes in complete confusion and instinctively stepped backward, believing she had wandered somewhere she did not belong. The silver light moved with her. A soft murmur spread through the crowd. Some whispered prayers. Others exchanged anxious glances. Elder Rowan closed his eyes for only a moment before opening them again with growing certainty. He had spent more than 60 years studying forgotten temple records. There had only been one passage describing such a miracle. The moon path appeared only when destiny had been hidden by human hands. Across the hall, Cale felt the warmth beneath his ceremonial collar become impossible to ignore. He reached toward the hidden mark beneath the fabric, surprised to find it glowing with a faint silver light beneath his fingertips. His wolf no longer questioned anything. It stood completely still inside him, calm and certain in a way he had never experienced before. His instincts pulled him toward the servant standing alone beside the palace doors with greater force than any command he had ever obeyed. Isabella noticed the subtle movement of Cale's hand and the direction of his gaze. Confusion replaced her confident smile. "Your Majesty?" she asked gently. Cale heard the words, yet his attention remained fixed elsewhere. He watched Evelyn lower her eyes again, clearly wishing to disappear before becoming the center of unwanted attention. Nothing about her suggested ambition. Nothing about her reflected calculation or pride. If anything, she seemed uncomfortable with every curious glance now directed toward her. That quiet humility unsettled him more than any miracle unfolding before his eyes. Elder Rowan finally raised his voice. "No one is to leave this hall." The command echoed through the chamber. Even the royal guards hesitated before stepping away from the palace doors. The old priest slowly descended the altar, following the glowing silver lines across the marble floor until he stood only a few feet from Evelyn. She looked at him with quiet uncertainty. "Have I done something wrong?" she asked softly. Elder Rowan studied her face for a long moment before gently shaking his head. "No, child," he answered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I fear someone else did. Many years ago." At those words, another pulse of silver light swept across the ancient hall, and for the first time since the ceremony had begun, every person present realized they were no longer witnessing the end of a royal tradition. They were standing at the beginning of a truth that had waited years to be revealed. No one dared to speak as Elder Rowan slowly lifted his carved staff and rested its silver tip upon the glowing lines beneath Evelyn's feet. The moment the ancient would touch the marble, the shimmering light surged upward, surrounding the old priest in a gentle silver radiance before spreading across the altar once again. A collective gasp swept through the hall. Symbols that had remained invisible for centuries appeared one after another around the sacred platform, forming circles of ancient script that only the highest temple keepers had ever studied. Elder Rowan's eyes widened with recognition. His lips moved silently as he translated the forgotten language engraved by priests long before the kingdom itself existed. When he finally looked up, sorrow filled his weathered face. "The moon did not change her choice," he said quietly. "Her choice was hidden." Confused whispers immediately spread through the nobles. Members of the royal council exchanged uneasy glances while Isabella's father stepped forward, forcing a polite smile. "Surely there must be some misunderstanding," Lord Montgomery said. "The ceremony has already been completed according to every royal law." Elder Rowan slowly turned toward him. "The ceremony followed the law of men," he answered, "not the law of the moon." His words settled over the gathering with unmistakable weight. Cale remained silent, watching every movement with growing disbelief. He had trusted the sacred traditions his entire life. Never once had anyone suggested that the blessing itself could be concealed. Elder Rowan continued, his voice growing steadier. "Ancient records speak of only one circumstance capable of hiding a destined bond: a veil placed upon another's soul through forbidden mooncraft. Such deception does not create destiny. It only delays it." Evelyn stared at him, completely overwhelmed. "I do not understand," she whispered. "I have never practiced magic. I have never even entered the royal temple before tonight." The old priest offered her a gentle look. "I believe you, child. That is why I fear this was done to you, not by you." Silence returned. Every eye slowly shifted from Evelyn toward the assembled noble families. Faces that had once carried effortless confidence now revealed uncertainty. Isabella's calm expression wavered for the first time that evening. She instinctively touched the silver pendant resting against her neck, a family heirloom she had worn since childhood. Elder Rowan noticed the movement. His gaze lingered upon the pendant before narrowing thoughtfully. "May I examine the heirloom, my lady?" he asked with respectful courtesy. Isabella hesitated. "It belonged to my grandmother." "Then if it carries only memories, there is nothing to fear." After a long pause, she unclasped the pendant and handed it to him. The instant Elder Rowan's fingers closed around the polished silver, the gemstone at its center released a faint black shimmer before cracking cleanly down the middle. The sound was barely louder than breaking glass, yet it echoed through the silent hall. Dark mist no thicker than morning fog drifted from the fractured stone before dissolving into the moonlight. Elder Rowan closed his eyes in grief. "Moonveil crystal," he whispered. "Forbidden for nearly 300 years. The hall erupted into stunned murmurs. Lord Montgomery stepped forward in visible shock. "That cannot be possible. Our family has preserved that pendant for generations." Elder Rowan nodded sadly. "Exactly. Which means the enchantment was older than any person standing in this room." Cale looked from the broken pendant to Evelyn, and suddenly every strange instinct, every unexplained feeling, every restless moment throughout the evening fit together with quiet, undeniable clarity. Destiny had not abandoned him. It had been waiting patiently beneath a lie that neither he nor Evelyn had ever known existed. The silence that followed seemed heavier than any royal decree ever spoken within the Hall of Moonlight. Alpha King Cale Ashford slowly stepped away from the altar, ignoring the startled expression surrounding him. The silver light beneath the marble floor continued to glow. With quiet determination, tracing every step he took until it reached Evelyn. She instinctively backed away, still holding her folded gray shawl against her chest. "Your Majesty," she said softly, lowering her eyes, "please do not come any closer. There has already been enough confusion because of me." Cale stopped only a few feet away. For the first time that evening, he looked at her not as a servant standing at the edge of the celebration, but as the woman whose quiet kindness had remained unnoticed while an entire kingdom celebrated the wrong future. He remembered the gentle way she had thanked those who embarrassed her instead of answering with anger. He remembered the calm sadness in her voice when she wished only that the moon would never regret the night. None of it had been the performance of someone seeking a crown. It had been the honesty of someone who expected nothing. Behind him, members of the royal council began speaking over one another. Some urged the ceremony to continue until another investigation could be completed. Others argued that no decision should be made while so many questions remained unanswered. Lord Montgomery attempted to restore order, insisting that an ancient family heirloom could not erase years of accepted tradition. Yet every voice gradually faded into the background as Cale quietly removed the ceremonial clasp fastening the royal cloak across his shoulders. Gasps spread through the hall. No Alpha King had ever removed the ceremonial mantle before a moon-choosing ceremony officially concluded. Cale folded the heavy midnight blue cloak over one arm before looking at Elder Rowan. "If the moon's blessing has not been fulfilled," he asked calmly, "then has this ceremony truly ended?" The old priest answered without hesitation. "No, Your Majesty. A ceremony cannot be completed while destiny remains unanswered." Cale nodded once before turning back toward Evelyn. He gently placed the royal cloak across her shoulders. The rich fabric settled over her simple gray dress, its silver embroidery catching the moonlight in a way that made even the humblest linen appear quietly regal. Evelyn looked down in surprise before quickly trying to remove it. "I cannot wear this," she whispered. "It belongs to the Alpha King." Cale lightly shook his head. "Tonight, it belongs to the woman who was shown less kindness than every custom of this kingdom should have demanded." His words carried no anger, only sincere regret. Evelyn looked into his silver eyes for the first time without immediately looking away. She found no pride there, only quiet disappointment directed toward himself. "I made my decision believing I understood the truth," Cale continued. "If that truth was hidden from both of us, then the greatest mistake of this evening was mine." The hall remained perfectly still. Even Isabella lowered her eyes with quiet dignity, understanding that none of what had happened had been her choice either. Elder Rowan smiled gently as the silver light surrounding the altar softened into a warm glow. The ancient symbols beneath the marble floor brightened once more, no longer pulsing with urgency, but with peaceful anticipation. Destiny had not demanded a perfect king. It had only waited for a humble man willing to admit when he had been wrong, and for a forgotten woman whose kindness had remained unchanged whether anyone noticed it or not. No one spoke for several long moments. The silence was no longer filled with uncertainty but with reflection, as though every person standing inside the Hall of Moonlight had suddenly realized that greatness was not measured by titles or perfect ceremonies. Evelyn gently held the royal cloak around her shoulders before looking toward Elder Rowan. "Your Grace," she said softly, "if the moon truly revealed this tonight, then I ask for one thing before any decision is made." The old priest inclined his head. "Speak freely, child." She drew a steady breath. "Do not let this become another reason for people to hate one another." Lady Isabella did not know what had been hidden. "I do not wish for anyone to lose their honor because of something they never chose." Her words settled over the hall more powerfully than any royal command. Isabella slowly stepped forward, her eyes shining with quiet emotion. She bowed her head toward Evelyn. "I believe this future belonged to me," she admitted honestly, "but I never wished to take what was meant for someone else. I hope that one day you will forgive the unkindness shown to you in this hall, even by those who remained silent." Evelyn answered with a gentle smile. "Forgiveness begins when someone chooses truth over pride." Elder Rowan raised his carved staff once more. The silver glow surrounding the altar flowed peacefully through the ancient symbols before rising toward the great stained glass windows. At that very moment, the clouds parted outside, allowing brilliant moonlight to pour into the palace once again. The ceremonial bell remained silent now, as though it had completed the purpose for which it had waited centuries. Cale stepped forward and, instead of reaching for the sacred crown, lowered himself onto one knee before Evelyn. Gasps echoed softly throughout the chamber. Kings were accustomed to receiving loyalty, not offering humility. Cale looked up with quiet sincerity. "I cannot ask destiny to erase my mistake," he said. "But I can spend every tomorrow proving that I have learned from it. Whether your answer comes today or many seasons from now, it will always be your choice." Tears glistened in Evelyn's blue eyes, not from sadness, but from finally being seen for who she truly was. She did not reach for the crown. She simply offered him her hand, and he accepted it with gratitude rather than triumph. Around them, the silver light faded into the gentle glow of an ordinary full moon. The celebration that followed was unlike any recorded in the kingdom's history, because it honored neither power nor beauty alone. It honored kindness, humility, and the courage to choose what was right after discovering what was true. And from that night forward, parents across Silver Hollow told their children that a king could choose a bride, but only character could earn a queen, and that destiny always found its way to the heart that never stopped choosing compassion.